Well, welcome back, everyone. Here we are again. Over the month of August, I expect my experience was not unlike many others. Everybody at home is worried about inflation, crime, open borders. And in Kentucky in particular, we have a different level of concern with regard to the horrendous flooding that occurred in the southeastern Appalachian part of my state, where I spent a good deal of time over the last month. As we look ahead, obviously the one thing we need to do is to pass a continuing resolution to take us to some date that will be, I guess, determined by the majority past the election. I think the key to getting the CR done with the least amount of controversy is for it to be as clean as possible.
Well, it was just days, and 8 days to be exact, after the Democrats had touted the deficit reduction in their reckless tax and spending spree, that they did away with all the deficit reduction. The president, with a stroke of the pen, with his student loan forgiveness program, literally added, according to the Penn-Wharton budget model, $600 billion to $1 trillion to the debt. So much for deficit reduction. And the idea that this is actually canceled or forgiven is a misnomer. This is simply debt that is being transferred from the 13% of the people in this country who have student loans to the 87% of people in this country who don't have student loans. It's a slap in the face to people who have worked hard to pay their loans off, people who didn't have the opportunity to go to college in the first place, parents who scrimped and saved to get their kids' education paid for, or our vets who can use the GI program to go to school. But the fact of the matter is, what they did is going to be inflationary on so many levels. First and foremost, of course, is college tuition. There isn't anything about this that isn't going to make college tuition go up. What college is going to look at this and say, well, we can just raise tuition because they're just going to wipe out the debt. We'll just raise it by whatever that amount is. And on a more general level, it's going to fuel the inflationary fire that has consumed so many families and households across this country who are paying more literally for everything, from gasoline to utilities to food. Everything in their lives has gone up as a result of inflation. And the Democrats doubled down. They just flat out doubled down on all the spending that they've done, in this case without any vote occurring in the United States Congress, up to $1 trillion in new debt that is going to be put on the backs of the 87% of the people in this country who don't have student loans and don't have student debt. It is fundamentally unfair to tens of millions of Americans in this country. And the Democrats demonstrated once again they don't care about fiscal responsibility, they don't care about debt or deficit reduction. Right now they care about one thing, and that is buying votes going into a November election.
Last week, President Biden gave a political speech flanked by Marines. And then he lied to the American people and said it was a policy speech. If it had been a policy speech, he might have talked about some of the things that are keeping Americans awake at night as they worry about their future and the future for their families. Never once did he say anything about prices, inflation, gas, the border, crime, the cartels, fentanyl, or our debt. Not a single word. No, the president shut his eyes to the pain that he has caused the American people, and then he looks down his nose at tens of millions of Americans who go to work and pay their taxes and who are being hurt by an economy that the president himself has undermined. I had a chance to visit the Wyoming Food Bank this last couple of weeks. Food banks across the country are really getting hurt by increasing demand. The demands are so high because people are falling further and further behind. People are struggling to pay their bills, to keep up. to make ends meet. People have had to cut back on lots of things in their lives. They've had to cut back on school supplies. They've had to cut back on back-to-school clothing for their kids. They feel pain every time they go to the gas station or the grocery store. The kitchen table is not full of food. It's full of a stack of bills and an empty paycheck and an empty checkbook. Food prices in the last year are up 13% across the United States. That's the fastest increase in food prices since 1979. And we're talking about food that people need every day. We're talking about milk and eggs and meat and fruit and vegetables. But for 16 months in a row now, prices have gone up faster than pay. And that's why people are falling further behind and they feel stuck and squeezed and stressed. Republicans want to get down the prices, want to stop this inflation. And the way to do it is unleashing American energy, cutting Washington red tape, and stopping this reckless Washington spending. That's the way we get our country back on the right track.
Well, our friends on the other side, in the bill that they passed right before we left, the reconciliation bill, decided that the government could do a better job managing the healthcare and pharmaceutical system than people could in a competitive marketplace. Just a few years ago, they decided they could do a better job with the healthcare system with the so-called Affordable Care Act, which turned out not to be very affordable at all. One of the ways it was going to be affordable was taking the student loans out of the private sector with a government guarantee, and the government would collect the student loans, and the interest from the student loans would fund Obamacare. Well, I said at the time, and others did too, this is the beginning of the end of an effective student loan program. Once you put the government in charge of collecting loans will not be collected in the way they have been before. And so they proved that. They also proved, by the way, in the reconciliation bill that Obamacare is not working in other ways, because one of the big hundreds of billions of dollars of spending in that bill was to subsidize people who make up to $400,000 who couldn't buy insurance under the current Affordable Care Act system. As it turned out, the Affordable Care Act wasn't very affordable at all, and it's not affordable when the government comes in and eliminates the competitive marketplace, or decides that the competitive marketplace is working so well that we could run this just as well as the competitive marketplace was, only to find out that a decade later, we decide we're just going to forgive all the loans, because forgiving the loans is easier than collecting the loans. And as Senator Thune said, for people who didn't go to college because they couldn't afford it, or people who got a certificate that was helpful to them to get a job but no grants or loans were available for those kinds of programs, or people who went right to work, or people who paid their loans off, those are the people who are now responsible for the somewhere between $600 billion and $1 trillion that's just been transferred from the income side of the government balance sheet to the debt side of the government balance sheet. Unbelievably unfair, unbelievably short-sighted. If you look at what's just happened and think people are going to be rushing to pay their student loans off in the future, you're just not thinking about how people react to this kind of government irresponsibility.
Welcome back to D.C. I hope everybody was able to get out of this bubble. I had the great pleasure of going home to Iowa and being out on the 99 county tour. Senator Chuck Grassley has completed his 99 county tour. I have a few more yet to go. I am very close. But while I was out and about across Iowa, I did a number of public town halls and hearing from Iowans. And number one, and you barely hear about it here, inflation. right? I know we had this bill called the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's not reducing inflation. And Iowans are really feeling the heat. We have many folks in my own neighborhood. They're working second jobs now because they can't afford the cost of sending their kids back to school. Maybe they need a new pair of cleats for their kids, whatever it is. They're working second jobs. We have this student loan transference. It's not debt forgiveness, it's transferring student loan debt to hardworking Iowans and Americans. Folks like my brother, who is a union laborer. He did not go to college, he went straight into the workforce. Now he's being told he will pay for the student loans of some dude that just got a six-figure job working on Wall Street. How is that fair, folks? How is that fair? Iowans are really ticked off about this, and you can tell I'm ticked off. My sister worked her way through community college. I was fortunate enough to get scholarships to go to school. But where is the responsibility out there? You sign your name on the line, you need to pay it back. That's how Iowans feel. Don't put it on my sister's back. Don't put it on my brother's back. Okay? So let's go back to the drawing board. Let's make sure we're talking about things we need to do to reduce inflation, to get fuel prices down, to make sure that Iowans can afford the cost of heating their home this fall and winter. Let's get back to the basics here in the United States and do what we're supposed to do. Let's stop all the shenanigans right here in Congress and make sure we're taking care of our citizens.
As I traveled across Florida during the recess, what a lot of people talked about was inflation. You have people going to food banks, they're delaying their retirement, they're coming out of retirement, they're taking second jobs. And if you look at, actually look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics information, we're not creating a lot of new full-time jobs, we're creating part-time jobs. That's what's going on around this country. So the latest is they're mad about this student loan bailout. So what we did was we take somebody like in our state, a construction worker, we have a lot of construction workers in our state building homes and things, and they're going to pay off the debt for some young person that just finished school, maybe went to an Ivy League school and got a job on Wall Street. Nobody thinks that's fair. By the way, it's not money we have. It's money, it's just new debt of the federal government. That's exactly what it is. So let's look at what the number is. It's up to $1 trillion. How in the world does a president have the right to just on their own increase the debt of this country by $1 trillion? We already had $30 trillion worth of debt. So I think it's important that we figure out how to get a vote on this and stop this. This is wrong. It's unfair to people all across the state. My state it's unfair to people all across the country. I think it's important we get a vote on that. We got to start our higher education institutions need to be held accountable for their tuition increases and their kids not getting jobs. This is completely unfair to people like the construction workers in my state that didn't go to college. They're working hard. Some of them even have 2 jobs, but now they're paying for somebody who went to an Ivy League school and get a job on Wall Street.
Senator McConnell. Does a clean CR, in your mind, mean no money for Ukraine? And are you concerned about getting Ukraine money in either the CR or the omnibus because it might be harder to pass some of that money next year?
Well, I think the cleaner the CR, the better. Ukraine is obviously a priority for most of us on both sides of the aisle. We'll have to see what they're requesting and how much of it is actually designed to help Ukraine wage the war. These are the discussions that are going on right now with Senator Shelby and his team and Senator Leahy and his team. But overall, the cleaner, the better.
Leader McConnell, would you support Donald Trump helping Republicans more financially in the midterms? And also, what is the Republican plan to make up for the cash crunch of the NRSC?
Well, look, what I think I can safely say is all 50 members of the Senate on my side of the aisle are doing everything they can to find a way to help get to 51. And that's exactly what the other side's doing. And once we finish up our work here this month, we'll all be in full campaign mode.
Leader McConnell.
Leader McConnell, thank you so much. Switching to Iran, White House today said there's still gaps when it comes to signing the nuclear deal between the Islamic Republic. Some members of your party traveled, including Senator Lindsey Graham, to Jerusalem lately and said they're opposed to the nuclear deal. When it comes to Iran nuclear deal, has your position changed? And do you think if the Republicans win the midterm, they would have more leverage to resist the nuclear deal, signing the nuclear deal with Iran?
Well, it appears as if this administration, like the Obama administration, is going to take the view that they can do an executive decision, an executive agreement with the Iranians by themselves. It's not a treaty. We objected to their going forward the last time without a treaty, which clearly applies to this situation. They may try to do that again, which minimizes our ability to impact what has all the earmarks of another bad deal.
Leader McConnell, as a member of the Gang of Eight, do you want a briefing from the Department of Justice or other intelligence agencies about what documents were seized at Mar-a-Lago, and do you have any concerns about the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, I'm not, having just gotten back, I've not personally talked to any of the other Gang of Eight about this. I think Senator Rubio's addressed that issue, so maybe you ought to ask him.
Leader McConnell, do you think it's appropriate the way that the former president was storing those top secret and classified documents at his private estate at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, I don't really have any comments on this whole investigation that's been dominating the news for the last month. I think we're following it like all of you are.
Those are classified documents, Mr. Lee.